Alan here. It's been a while. Let me explain my absence. I was on the other side of the country for about 3 weeks for work. I live in the city of Calgary. I went to New Brunswick. New Brunswick is the province. It's part of Atlantic Canada, what we call Atlantic Canada. It's on the other side of the country. It borders the state of Maine. That should give you an idea where it is. And I live in Calgary. I'm just north of Montana, and the it's a long ways. It is a long ways, and I was there. I was staying in hotels the whole time. I was there for some work, and of course, while I was there in the evenings, I had free time, so I read some books. And I'm going to give you a review of one of the books I read. I read three. One was about current politics. One was another historical book, which I didn't think was that great. It's a primary source for a lot of stuff, but it didn't give a lot of information of what I was searching for. But there was one really good book that I read, and I'm going to review right now. And the book is Marco Polo, The Travels. Of course, everyone's heard of this book. Everyone knows Marco Polo traveled across Asia, served in the court of the Mongols, and he was a huge. And he wrote this book. It's kind of by accident he wrote the book. Actually, he talks about it because he got back after his travels, after years of travels, and there's a war between Venice and Genoa. He's from Venice, and he gets captured by the Genoese and thrown in jail. And he's in the same cell. His cellmate is a writer, and they start talking, and it's like, hey, why don't I chronicle your journey? And it became a staple of Western literature through the centuries, and it's still today. You could go to Chapters, which is like the Canadian equivalent of Barnes and Nobles, and you can find it there. You can go to Barnes and Nobles, you can find it there, and it's great. A lot of interesting stuff for church history. And secular history as well. And I'm going to give a bit of a book review and whet your appetite for what you can get, what you expect to get if you read this book. Because it's got some important things for church history, like Church of the East and Historian Church. And it also has some stuff for secular history. That's good. I'm going to focus on the church history, but I'll touch on a bit of the secular history as well. The first thing is the amount of Church of the East or historian Christians there were in the East. Because each time he gets to a city, you go 6 days travel from this city, you get to this city, and this city. And then he'll talk about the new city along the steppe of Asia, along the Silk Road, China. And they'll say, oh, yeah, there's this, this, and this. The people, he has three classifications: Christians, the Muslims, who he either calls Saracens or worshippers of Muhammad, and idolaters, which is pretty much everything else: Buddhist, Hindu, etc. And then he talks about the city, what their main industry is, and he'll talk about the faiths of the city, the big faiths. And quite often, you will be shocked to see how much Church of the East and historian are in this book. I'm going to give you 3 examples. I could have given you 10, but I'm going to give you 3. All right, turn to page 53 of the Penguin version. Kashgar was once a kingdom, but nowadays it is subject to the Great Khan. The people worship Muhammad. There are many towns and cities, of which the largest and finest is Kashgar. The country lies to the east northeast. Okay, I'm going to skip a bit here. There are some Turks living among the Saracens in this country who are Nestorian Christians. They have their own churches and keep their liturgy. And the inhabitants of this province have their own language. And then he talks a bit more about it. But yeah, a reference to the Turkish Nestorian Christians. All right, page 175, same thing. All right. When the traveler leaves Zhuozhou, It's a Chinese city. He rides southward for 4 days past many cities and villages. The people thrive on trade and industry. They are idolaters and use the paper money of the great Khan, their lord. I'm going to skip down a bit. The people are idolaters and burn their dead. There are also some Christians who have a church in the city. They are subject to the great Khan and have paper money. He talks a lot about the paper money that the great Khan uses. And yeah, another reference to Nestorian Christians. He doesn't say they're Nestorian, but you can probably guess they're Nestorian. He just refers to them as Christians. Let me give one example, one more example of this. Again, I could give you so much more because it's amazing how many Church of the East Christians there were until about 1400. They were pretty much all wiped out. How did that happen? That's for another video, but something to do with a guy named Tamerlane. All right, page 187. After leaving the city of at the end of the day's journey, the traveler comes to a big and very beautiful city called Baoying. The people are idolaters and burn the bodies of their dead. They are subject to the great Khan. They use paper money. Some Turkish Nestorian Christians also live here and have a church in the city. They live by trade and by crafts. They have a great deal of silk and make many kinds of gold. So he talks about the city. So yeah, tons of evidence of Nestorian Christians around 1290s, 1300 when the time period this covers. All right, let's look at another thing important to church history. He talks about the tombs. In the scriptures, the three magi who visit Christ, who give the gold, frankincense, and myrrh. They found their tombs in Persia. And he talks on page 29. I'm going to read some of 29 and page 30. Persia is a very great province that was once very noble and powerful, but has now been smashed and ruined by the Tatars. He means the Mongols when he says Tatars. In Persia, in the city called Save, from which the three magi set out when they went to worship Jesus Christ. It is said, moreover, that the three magi are buried here in three huge and resplendent sepulchres. And above each sepulchre is a square structure topped with a dome of superb workmanship. Each lies next to the other, and their bodies are uncorrupted and have hair and beards. One was named Balthazar, the second Gaspar, and the third Melchior. Messer Marco questioned many of the city's inhabitants, he's talking about his dad, about the lives of the three magi. But no one was able to tell him anything except that they were three kings who were buried there long ago. But he was eventually able to find out what I will tell you now. 3 days further on, he came across a town called Kala Atasparastan, or in our language, town of the fire worshippers. And that is a statement of fact because the men of this town do worship fire. And I will tell you why they worship it. The men of this town say that far back in time, the three kings of their country went to worship a newborn prophet, taking with them three offerings, namely gold, frankincense, and myrrh, in order to establish whether that prophet was God, an earthly king, or a physician. For they said, if he takes the gold, he is an earthly king. If he takes the frankincense, he is God. And if he takes the myrrh, he is a healer. And when the Magi came to the place where the infant was born, the youngest of the three kings set off on his own to see him. He found that the infant resembled himself, for he seemed to be of the same age and appearance, and he came out filled with wonder. Then the second, a man of middle age, took his place, and in the same way the infant seemed to him, as he had to the other, to be of his own appearance and age. He too came away quite amazed. Then the third and oldest went in, and just the same thing happened to him as to the other two, and he emerged deep in thought. When all three kings were together, they told one another that they had what they had seen, and marveling greatly, decided they would all go in together. So all three were together before the infant, and they found him with his own features and looking his real age, which is to say, just 13 days old. Then they worshipped him and offered him gold, frankincense, and myrrh. The infant took all three offerings, and in return he gave them a closed casket, and upon receiving it, the three kings set out to return to their own country. So this is interesting. He's recording a tradition that was from Persia at the time. Is this true? Could be. But that's interesting that this tradition existed. Very important for church history. The last church history point I want to bring up, and I find this quite fascinating, is St. Thomas, because of course St. Thomas went to India. He talks about his tomb and where they are and all that stuff. Let me go. He talks about St. Thomas in a few places, but I'm gonna talk to him. The body of Messer St. Thomas the Apostle lies in a little town in the province of Maabar, Maabar. There are a few inhabitants, and merchants do not visit the place because it has no merchandise worth taking away, and because it is in a very out of the way spot. Yet the fact is that many Christians and many Saracens make pilgrimages to this place. For I tell you that the Saracens of this country have great faith in him and declare that he was a Saracen. Like to this day, the Muslims believe that Christ and his disciples were all Muslims. It was the same back then. They say he was a great prophet and call him Avariyun, which means holy man. The Christians who guard the church have many trees that yield wine and bear coconuts. And then he goes on to talk about the Christian community there. But yeah, no, they talk about the place where St. Thomas was and his tomb. And it's got some good things for secular. So that's the church history stuff. And there's more. There's so much more in this book. Again, cheap. It's easily available. It's part of Western literature. And in terms of secular history, there's a lot of stuff too. I'll just touch on a couple things. He talks about the court of Kublai Khan, the paper currency they used, and that is a big deal. He talks about that repeatedly. I think I read a portion that had it. He talks about the descriptions of several countries, including Russia, and it's amazing how Russia is talked about. It sounds like Russia today. And he talks about the assassins. If you've studied the Crusades, you know about the assassins, and it was the Mongols that actually finished the assassins off. During the Crusader era, the Christians and the Muslims knew how to deal with them, pay protection money and stuff like that. They kind of knew the politics. The Mongols were new, and they didn't know how to deal with them, so they just finished them off. They marched on their fortress, which I believe took 3 years to take because it was a very strategic position fortress. They just starved them out for 3 years, I believe. I believe it was 3 years. So yeah, that is the book I review, and I recommend to all of you. It's an important part of Western literature, and it tells us a ton about a world that we no longer know. And just think, if you live in Venice and you go to China, like that's a long trek even today. But back then, it was it was like going to Jupiter back then. It was completely out of this world. But yeah, so this is what I recommend. I'm back. The videos will be resuming, Lord willing, and I'm almost at 3,000 subscribers. So I ask that you subscribe and like the video, share, and God bless all of you.